All right, next I want to talk about collision boxes. We're dealing with objects that are supposed to look and feel as if they are in a real world, even though they are not real objects. This is not, I'm showing you the same level we left off with on the last video. That box looks like it might be real, but it actually has no substance to it. It's a digital image existing in a digital world. So what we do is we go in and we use things like collision to simulate the fact that objects have physics. If I were to lift that box up off the ground right now and apply physics to it without a collision box, it would drop right through the ground because there would be nothing to stop it because it has no substance. It would be looking at basically a see-through shell, and it would just pass right through the floor. So the fact that the floor has collision on it is what is actually allowing that box to stay there right now, because it really would just fall right through anything else. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do that. And to do this, I need to go back into a 3D program here for a moment. And I want to talk about the two concepts having to do with collisions. And that are, some objects are convex, some objects are concave. So what we have here is I've got two different types of cylinders. One of them is convex. The other one has a chunk cut out of it. This is called concave. And it's called concave. And a good way to remember that is cave, for me anyway. Cave means it is caved in somewhere. So there is an opening in the overall shape that makes it a more complex shape. So because a collision is going to go around the outside of an object, it can take one of three shapes. It can be, if you're doing it in the Unreal Engine, it can be a box, any sort of rectangular box. It can be a sphere, or it can be like a pill shape. And if you wanted to go into a 3D program, if you have 3D skills, you're probably going to want to make your own collision boxes, because that way you know it works a little bit better. Concave is a difficult thing to handle in Unreal. Convex can be handled automatically. Concave requires additional work. It takes a lot of memory if you want to try and pull off something that's concave. And it might be very important in your overall gameplay to have something that is concave. For example, if I had these two objects in a game, let's say the convex is a circular tower, and I don't want the player to actually walk through that tower. They need to be able to walk up to it and bang on it. If I put the pill-shaped capsule around it in the Unreal Engine, it's going to prevent me from getting in from all angles. I'm not going to be able to get into it at all, and it's going to work exactly the way I want it to work. If I were to put a box shape around it, the problem with a box shape, and I'll create a little box here around it, is the box shape would actually create corners that would prevent me. Get that up there somewhere. Pull this up and then drop that back down. If it went around the outside like that, and if I go into wireframe here so you can see it, there actually would be areas that I couldn't get to. Even if I made that really tight, if I said, this is going to be the exact width and it's going to be the exact depth all the way around, and I'll pull it down just a little bit more, that you can see that there are corners. If I was trying to walk around a big building, there would be like these invisible corners that I kept butting into as I went around it. So the shape that you put around an object is really important, whether it be spherical, cubical, or whether it's that capsule shape. Now concave, on the other hand, what if I was doing this in a big tower and I needed to be able to walk into this shape right here? So you would think, well, what you could do is you could probably take this and slide it over to here. But if I look at it in a wireframe now, I can't get into this area down here at all. If this was a big building and I actually needed to walk up to that wall, that block right there would prevent me from getting to it. So I would have to figure out a different way to do that. So I would have to make a shape that was a little bit more, that conformed a little bit better to this, but that uses up a tremendous amount of memory. So let me show you another example here that might make some sense for you also. Delete those, and let's turn those little things off. And let's look at a wall. This is generally, think of this as that could be that same box that I have over in there now. This is a convex object. It's not caved in anywhere. It has no holes anywhere in it. It's actually a solid wall. And I could put a solid cube around this thing to prevent me from walking through it. It would work very well and would be handled very easily in the Unreal Engine. I can go in and just automatically do it, which we're going to do here in just a second. I'll show you how that works. All right. A little bit more complex situation, though, is the window. Now, this is concave. It has a hole in it. More than likely, your character, if you're playing this in a game, you're not going to have your character crawl through the window, and you can get away with a rectangular box that goes around the outside of this thing. A regular convex collision box would go around the outside of that. It would block the window. You wouldn't be able to get through it. You wouldn't be able to pass anything through it. It would put a solid wall against that thing. Then if we look at this one, this is where we run into issues, because I can't put a collision box around this one at all. This is a doorway. I need to walk through that doorway. Any kind of a collision box that I put on that's a standard convex collision box is going to cause me problems, because it's going to block me from getting through that door. Now, if you look at that, you might think, well, why couldn't you put a box, maybe on a collision box on one side and a collision box on this other side over here, and then that would leave a little opening above, put a little collision box up here, and that would work pretty well for what it is that you would do, and you'd be able to pull off a complex collision set for a concave object. The problem with Unreal is you can only add one collision box on. So if you go into the game engine, there's only one choice you have for a collision box. You can't go in and add 3 of them. If you needed that, you would have to come into a 3D program and you would have to build those boxes separately. And I've got a little thing here. I'll just kind of pull it over for a second. The web page, the wiki web page for collision boxes in Unreal does have instructions, what you need to do. If you're working in a 3D program, you have to go in and name the boxes a certain way. So for instance, if I was doing this one, I would probably create one box maybe over here like that, and then I could create a second box over here, and then I would bring this one over here like that, and then maybe lift it up like this, and then I would come in and I would shorten the height on that thing down to that, and I basically have 3 collision boxes right there. And if I name them properly, what happens is when I export the door and I export those 3 collision boxes with their proper names, Unreal, when you import this into the game engine, Unreal will make the collision boxes be associated with the object and be invisible. So you wouldn't see them, but they would block you from walking through the wall and allow you to walk through an opening. But you can't do that in Unreal. All right? So don't even think about trying that, because it's really a mess. The other thing that you have to remember, another shape that we deal with quite frequently and that we don't really stop to think about, are stairways. You can see if I was putting 3 collision boxes on that door to prevent me from walking through it, I would have to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 collision boxes on this to enable me to walk up these stairs. But keep in mind, your character doesn't actually walk up the stairs. They kind of go up an invisible ramp. And in the third-person game level, if you go in and open up that one, you'll see that if you watch the character going up the stairs, they kind of slide up a ramp. Creating an animated sequence that steps on each individual stairway would require you creating an animated sequence for every individual stair. Every stair is going to be different. And you would have to go in and build all those things, and it's not really very practical. So we just create like an invisible ramp, and the ones that are already in Unreal already have that built into it, so you don't really have to worry about them. Now let's go back over here and let's look at this level again. And you can see I've got the BSPs over here. The curved stairs, the linear stairs, spiral stairs, they already have all the collisions built into them because they are geometry, and those geometries already have those things that are in there. Now, if you're going to go in and you need to work on a collision box, when I imported this particular box, I brought it in with no collision box. I specifically didn't have that thing turned on. So let me pull this window over here. I've already got it already to the side. Normally what you do is you just double click on the asset that you want to open up, and it'll open up a window that looks something like this. And it shows you your model. And you can actually see it all there in place. It's lit, everything is going, and there's a lot of information here about it. It shows you materials. I'm going to go through this window in a little bit more detail, and it's talking specifically about some other assets. But for right now, here's what I want to show you. You notice there's an orange button here that says collision. And I can turn it off or I can turn it on. If it's orange, it means it's on. If it's not orange, it means it's turned off. And you'll notice you don't really see anything. There's nothing going on. That's because there is no collision on this object. Normally what would happen is you would see a little outline around it if you had collision on it. That's how you can tell. I also have a collision drop down up over here, which has about 8 or 9 different choices. A sphere, a capsule, and a box. And there you can see the collision box around the outside of it. If I turn that off, you can't see it. Turn that on, you can see it. If I were to try to walk up to this thing, I would bump into this invisible collision box, and it would, not probably be very practical for what I wanted to do. I've also got a capsule, which looks like this. This, by the way, can be adjusted. You can select it, and you can actually go in and you can scale it down. So maybe it works a little bit better for you if you're doing something like that. But again, that's not very practical. It's not really what I want. I would bump into that box from the outside. So I'll go back and I'm going to remove that again. And I'll come back up here and say add a box. And it puts this little green box around the outside, and it's all perfectly done. Now, the other choices that are up there, I'm going to discourage you from using. Basically, each one of these next 3, X, Y, and Z, on that 10 DOP, that has to do with the resolution. If I went in here and I said, let's do the 10 DOP on the Y, you notice all of a sudden down here on the bottom, let's go back to that. Down here on the bottom, I have a collision box that is a little bit more complex than it was a second ago. Come on. Sometimes your mouse gets kind of wacky on you. Right, so you can see down there on the bottom down there, it's a little bit wacky. Each one of those facets that you see is complicating the collision box and making it a little bit more memory intensive. The last one that's up there, the 26, is really complicated. Let me delete all of them first, remove them all, and I'll go back and I'll do that 26. Basically, it's not really doing much, I guess, but because the shape's not really that complicated. There is an option up here. Let me remove that. There is an option up here to auto-convex collision. Now, I'm going to talk about this one in a separate video, and it's a little window that comes up down over here. And basically, it allows me to control the accuracy at the expense of memory. So right now, if I were to say apply, it would probably think for a moment and come back and apply a fairly simple box. If I said, well, let's jack up the setting on that. Let's go to a maximum of 29 whole-verts, and let's take the accuracy up to 100% and click apply. I may not even have enough time here. It's really not that complicated. It'll probably do it. And it's going to look exactly the same, but it's actually here added in a whole lot more complex shapes underneath it, which are not doing anything. I don't really care about the underside of that box. I'm just wasting a lot of memory. So let me go back and I'm going to remove that. Remove that collision. I'll go back to my wireframe. Well, not wireframe, excuse me. Go back up here to collision. I'm going to go back to add the box. I'm going to click the save button. So that has been saved on that one. I will close that down. And now when I come back to play my game and I try to go through that box, it blocks me from going through it. In fact, I have to go completely around it to get in from the other side because of that. There's actually a giant invisible box from the top of that gear to the bottom of the gear that's blocking you from moving through that thing at all, because that's the way animated sequences work. But again, I can't get through there. And if I come back down here, I can't get through there. All right. So that's basically what collisions are. You can look. I have in Canvas the wiki page for collisions. You can go and search the exactly how to build them in a 3D program if that's what you're working with, or how you need to name those so that they come out and do that. And you'll be all set.